In this video, we're going to discuss three very important topics in the food industry. We're going to discuss concentration, globalization, and the last one is going to be coordination. So what is concentration? Concentration is the amount of the market controlled by just a few firms. So what we mean by the market is what market share is being controlled by a select amount of firms. Let's use cereal as an example. Cereal, 87% of all of the cereal that is produced and bought and sold within the United States is controlled by just 4 companies. So we talk about their market and we say, what is their market share? How much do they control of the market? Well, 4 different companies that produce cereal control 87% of the whole cereal market within the United States. And we usually indicate market share and the amount of concentration within an industry is indicated by just 4 firms. We take the largest 4 firms, we figure out what is the total amount of the market that they produce to, and then you add those together, and if those 4 firms control over 50% of the market share, we consider them to be concentrated, that to be a concentrated industry. So cereal is a great example of this. 87% of all of the cereal that is produced by just 4 companies. And that is it. That is a highly concentrated market. One of the greatest concerns in the agricultural industry as in regards to concentration is in the beef packing industry. Beef packing, there are 4 companies that control 85% of the beef packing industry. 85%. And the reason that this is such a great concern is because of all of the individual producers that are affected by this. Anybody who raises cattle throughout the whole United States is affected by this statistic right here. That 85% of all of the beef that is being processed in the United States has to go through these 4 packing plants. To add insult to injury, one of them is foreign owned, which is also can be a great concern. And another one is Tyson. Tyson has recently made it up into one of these big 4 packing plants by acquiring more and more packing plants. They are also involved in poultry and swine, heavily in poultry and swine. So not only are they a major part of the beef packing industry, they're also a major part of the poultry and the swine industry now. And putting all this together causes great concern for the beef packing industry that so much is being controlled by those 4 firms because it can greatly affect all the individual producers. Well, how does it really affect them? And what is the major downside to concentration? Well, it provides market power. Market power gives individual firms the ability to begin controlling prices and or quantities. So, for example, why is this such a great concern in the beef packing industry? Because one of the packing plants, let's just say packing plant A, decides that next week they are only going to produce at half production. For whatever reason, they're only going to produce at half production. Well, if they are one of 4 people, and let's say they control 20% of the market, because they're one of these 4 that control 85, so let's just say they control 20, they say they're only going to produce at half production. Well, there's 10% of the market of the industry that's not being produced anymore. What is that going to do? That's going to drive supply way up. Supply will stay constant, but nobody's going to want that beef anymore, so it drives prices down. So that becomes a major concern because these people, whenever they begin to hold market power, there's nowhere else for these farmers and ranchers to take their products to. Another great example is say that there's only one grain elevator in the county, and everybody takes their crops to that one grain elevator. Well, what happens if that grain elevator decides to start charging lower prices? There's really nowhere else to go with your crops, and you have to sell it. So that one elevator begins to hold a lot of market power. And that market power is often tied directly to that concentration. The next one we're going to talk about is globalization. Globalization is whenever firms begin to cross national boundaries. So if we had a United States company decide to cross and start producing down in Mexico as well, that particular company has now become globalized. It has now crossed that national boundary. So why is this important? Well, commodity processors are highly more globalized than food processors. As a matter of fact, the current trend is for commodity processors to become more and more globalized. And the least amount of globalized you are, the more domesticated you are, I guess you could say, then you're actually becoming one of the weaker companies. And for you to stay competitive as a commodity processor, you need to become globalized. And they're a lot more globalized than food processors. Well, why might that be the case? Isn't food the same everywhere? Well, not exactly. Think about what a commodity processor does. They turn raw agricultural goods, such as wheat or corn, into ingredients. Ingredients really don't change from country to country, but the products that they make out of those ingredients do change. So let's say, for example, you have the ingredient such as flour. You have a commodity processor. Commodity processor produces flour, and now they can sell flour to any country throughout the whole world because just about every country is going to use some type of flour in some way. But they go into all of these individual countries, and let's say Canada decides that they want bread. They want bread made out of all their flour. United States, they want donuts made. Let's say Italy wants pastries made. In France, they want all croissants made. In Mexico, they want tortillas made. Well, as a commodity processor, all you have to do is make flour, and you can distribute to all of these different countries. But then whenever you start emphasizing what kind of food you want, now you have to say, all right, well, I need a different operating system in, say, someplace like Canada, a different one in the United States, a different one in Italy, a different one in France, and a different one in Mexico. So they have to become more specialized in all of these different countries, meaning more equipment, meaning less efficiency, whereas a commodity processor can produce just something as simple as just the ingredient, and it works for all of these countries. Now, what is the concerns with with companies becoming more globalized? One of the major concerns is national security. This might seem silly, but it could be a real deal. So let's say, for example, there's a food shortage of wheat. Well, let's do another one. Let's say that there's a food shortage of beef. There's a shortage of beef in the whole world, and one of the foreign-owned companies in the beef industry is JBS, and they are actually owned or come out of Brazil. Their main country is Brazil. Well, let's say Brazil finds that they're in a shortage of beef and they really want beef. Well, what's JBS going to do? They're going to take all of the beef that they're producing here in the United States and ship it down into Brazil. So now Brazil has plenty of beef, but the United States doesn't. So then we start getting into national security and food security reasons. If all of these companies that are becoming more and more globalized, if they're all here in the United States and they're all based out of other countries, what happens whenever these other countries begin to run out of food? They begin to take the food off of the shelves in the United States and they put them in their actual respective countries that they're more loyal to. So that's a major concern. Another one is global concentration. So we've already talked about concentration over here, and we say that the more concentrated these food industries become, the more market power these companies begin to hold. Well, that's another major concern, is as companies become more globalized and have more global concentration, are they going to be able to start manipulating prices in such a way to start harming our farmers and ranchers? And the last one that we're going to talk about, the last major concern of globalization, is loss of national identity. Something like, it's kind of radical, but the idea behind this is that eventually all cheese is going to become cheddar and you'll never have Swiss or Parmesan or any type of other cheese. Because everybody, as you become more globalized, you don't want to become the company that has to produce all of these. You just want to produce one type of product out of the flour. So the idea behind the loss of national identity is that as these countries become more globalized, they take over more companies. Some cheese manufacturer in Switzerland decides, I'm no longer going to make Swiss cheese. I'm now going to start making just cheddar cheese. And you begin to lose that national identity. So those are the three major concerns of globalization. The last topic I'm going to discuss is coordination. So what is coordination? Coordination is a system that conveys what the consumers want to the producers. So it's a system that's allowing the producers to learn what the consumers want. So how is this done? Well, typically it's done through the marketers and through pricing. Originally, so we already discussed in one of the previous videos that marketers tie the consumers to producers. So everything has to go through this marketing channel, and we have products go up the marketing channel from the producer to the consumer. And then on the back side, you have prices coming down the backside, and you have money coming back on the backside. So what happens is, if prices are real high, it signals to producers to produce more of that product. But if prices are real low, it's telling producers, consumers don't want this, stop making as much. So traditionally, prices were the way that messages were conveyed back to the producers. These prices, the price swings, tell the consumer or tell the producers what to produce. Nowadays, we don't have, or the prices are not the only way they convey messages. Nowadays, we have social media and different organizations that start helping influence what consumers want. An example of that is prices for agricultural products may still be relatively the same as what they were 10 years ago. Hypothetically, I'm not real sure about that, but let's say that they are. But now consumers are wanting more non-GMO, organic products rather than the traditional agricultural way of, or traditional agricultural products are wanting these, in their opinion, more healthy products. These non-GMO, these all organic. So now they're going to social media, they're going to trade organizations, they're going to different methods to tell producers, hey, start producing non-GMO, start producing organic, and it's not really affecting the prices of traditional agricultural goods. So as a result, there are now other ways that consumers are letting the producers know we want a different product. Now another thing, consumers have gone through this trend of they're wanting lower prices. If you look at a place like Sears, where their slogan was good, better, best, well, what happened to Sears? They had to merge with another company in order to stay in business still. Whereas someplace like Walmart is thriving. Well, what's their slogan? Lower prices. So what's that telling the producers? And it's telling the businesses that consumers want lower prices. So as a result of consumers wanting lower prices, producers are now trying to give them lower prices, or processors are trying to give them lower prices. Different companies are trying to give them lower prices. One of the ways to give lower prices is through integration. We're now going to take a company such as Walmart, and rather than Walmart just being just a retail store, they're now going to start operating as a wholesaler as well. And they're going to begin to coordinate between the wholesalers and the retailers in more of an effective manner, and maybe even acquire those wholesalers to where now there's less inefficiencies in the market, and it's more of a smoother transition, and it allows lower prices. Well, that leads into vertical integration. What vertical integration is whenever you're taking two different steps of a channel and bringing them together under one management style. So in the marketing channel, we have different things such as we have the retailers, the wholesalers, we have the processors, we have the producers, you have transportation, and all of these are different individual sectors. Well, whenever you start combining a wholesaler and a retailer, now you're becoming vertically integrated. You're taking two separate steps of the marketing channel, bringing them together to become more efficient. So this has become a major trend in the agricultural industry, is to become more vertically integrated. And basically what it's saying is you're cutting out the middleman. Rather than a retailer going to a wholesaler and then the wholesaler going to the processor, what's happening is you have the retailer becomes a wholesaler as well and going directly to the processor to cut out that inefficiencies. So anytime that a company merges or starts interacting with two different steps of the marketing channel, they become vertically integrated. So a retailer going into wholesaling as well, they're becoming vertically integrated. If you think about it, say you're a feedlot, and originally you could either have the option to go and purchase all of the feed from a feed mill already pre-ground and everything in it, and all you're doing is feeding, or you can develop your own feed mill or buy a feed mill and operate all of it under the same management strategy. That's whenever you become vertically integrated. You're taking one step, which is being a feed mill, and then another step, which is actually working as a feeder, and combining them under the same management strategy. So one company owns both the feed mill and the feeder, and they become vertically integrated. Another example that a lot of people may kind of overlook is that a rancher. Well, what do you feed your cattle during the winter whenever you have no grass? We have to feed them either hay or cubes or something else. Well, a rancher or a farmer actually that produces their own hay or their own grain or their own crops in order to feed their livestock is now vertically integrated, because they're cutting out that middleman of the hay producer. They're cutting out that middleman of the feed mill. So somebody like a hay producer and a rancher, if they are involved in both and they feed their cattle the hay that they're producing, they are technically vertically integrated.